Goeienaand. Good evening, fellow South Africans. And what I'm attaching to this intro is a fairly lengthy video, but it is so refreshing to see a video where an African, and I'm talking about a black African, he's actually got a Zulu mother and a Xhosa father, so I guess he's a mix between Zulu and Xhosa, but he's talking common sense, and he's basically saying that you cannot take the farmlands away from the white farmers because, and he explains why, and he does it extremely well. He does ramble on a bit, like I do sometimes, but it's worthwhile listening to what he has to say because he is a breath of fresh air. Okay, and don't forget Black Monday this Monday, and don't forget to subscribe. Take care.
The issue I want to talk about here is the issue of the South Africa's land question. I know that the issue of South Africa's land question is a bit an emotional thing due to the past. I don't want to talk about how the issue of the anxieties and the stress which comes about the historical past of land acquisition in not only in South Africa alone but in throughout Africa. I don't want to dwell about that at the moment, but only talking about South Africa. Me myself, I was born in Limpopo. I come from South Africa. My mother is Zulu, my father is from the Xhosa, but then I left South Africa almost 19 years ago and come here to Canada. Now the issue I want to talk about is the issue of land. Here's how I see about the thing about land. In South Africa, black people should not take land from white people. Here's why I say black people should not take land from white people. Black people should not take or touch agricultural land. Agricultural land is a food production sector, and the food production sectors have been handled by Europeans or white people since they came to the continent. Black African leaders have never ever, no black person in Africa know who's producing food for the nation. They have no clue. Food in Africa has been produced by white people or private people, mostly in abundance or in large quantities. Food has always been produced by white people. Black people has either been consumers, buyers, or employees or something like that who work for white people's farms. I don't agree with the taking of farms or what is happening in South Africa. I don't agree of the taking of farms because the question of land in South Africa is not being dealt properly. The problem with African leaders, like now we've got this guy so-called Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa is the worst person we can ever. I would say Cyril Ramaphosa, I've got good respect for Nelson Mandela because he was already an old man, so I don't want to talk about him. Thabo Mbeki, Jacob Zuma, and Cyril Ramaphosa, these are the worst people we have ever heard in our country. Most of these people have no vision of the country. The problem with African leaders is this. African leaders, they don't have the vision of the nation. They have no vision of what type of a country they want to build. And they have no vision of anything in an economy except things which was built by Europeans a long time ago. They have no vision. If you look at 90% of African leaders, what they're doing at the moment, they're stealing, they're looting things they never built. The wealth of South Africa was built by Europeans. The entire wealth of South Africa, not only the entire wealth of South Africa, the wealth of South Africa was built by Europeans. The entire wealth of South Africa was built by Europeans. The country itself, the country's infrastructure, roads, railway, buildings, all this and that, including farms, all farming agriculture, including all largest farms in South Africa, all of those were built by white people. It's not a work of a black person. Most black people in Africa did not. Africans have never ever built things like that. Africans consume, they've never built even a farm. What you see today when you see people, I agree with Malema, what he's talking about, but I don't agree with the black people who are the ones to implement anything to do with the land. Land is better left alone, completely run by white people. You know, the reason why I say this is simple. I don't think in Africa, or there is an African leader who knows how to deal with land management. White people are the ones who are they're not only managing land, they're actually preserving the land in its beautiful structure. If you look at the land, which is all farms which are controlled and owned by white people, go and look at them and see how beautiful they are. Do you really think a black person can maintain a farm and look at and to make a farm an effective thing the way white people are, the way white people have designed the farms? Every designing of farms, including the grapes, go and see the grape yards, orange fruits and all the citrus, the fruits, the mango trees, and all that has been designed by white people. White people made that. You think a black person is who in Africa, in South Africa as a whole, what kind of a black person do you think can manage things like that? There is not even a single, because black people did not create farms. When Europeans came to South Africa, blacks were hunter-gatherers. We were hunting animals and killing animals for food. We did not create farms. Farms, it's a work of Europeans. White people came and built those farms. So to take a farm and say a black person is going to run things they don't know, you cannot run. It's like electricity. You cannot run electricity when you're not an electrician. All those tower lights and electricity and nuclear power plants, white people came and put that. If white people leave, all those things will collapse because you are not engineers. Most of black people, there is no black person in South Africa who is a scientist or an engineer to run those things if white people leave. The country will not only collapse, millions of South Africans will run away if white people leave. Millions of South Africa will run away. The reason why I say that is a lot of black people in South Africa, they are not training even their own people to run in industries. Tell me this, how many black leaders in parliament who own a farm, who can say, I know how to run a farm, I've run a farm for 2 years? How many black leaders know how to run a farm? Nobody. All farms are being run privately by private people who have got the expertise and the technology of knowing the seeds the seeds to grow, what type of seeds, to grow. All that technology, white people have got that. The white farmers have got those technologies to know which type of seeds to grow this season, which type of seeds to grow in which type of soil. A lot of black people in Africa have never learned anything to do with the soil itself. They don't know which type of soil to grow crops, which type of soil to grow which type of vegetables, or which type of crops to grow in which soil, which environment, where can this type of what I call seeds be grown, maize seeds, different type of maize. Africans have never learned things of that nature, particularly in South Africa. A lot of black people have never learned to manage soil, to manage the soil, soil management, how you manage the soil, or how you manage vast large sums of land. All that science is still owned primarily by white farmers. And I don't agree with a lot of what black people don't understand in this is that if you take a white farmer, there's nothing you are going to do with it. Because one thing, what white farmers are not just staying in those farms. They're using those farms for production, to produce, to feed the cities. A lot of black people, they don't know. 90% of black people, go and see black people in the rural areas. One person have got a small farm, they use it for subsistence. That means you farm, you produce a small pieces of maize or whatever crops you have for you to eat alone, you and your family. They don't produce food for the cities. In rural areas, people produce food for themselves. You can't take all those farms and say people are going to live in farms. A farm is a production sector. The purpose of farms is to produce food for the cities. It's not for people to stay. No one should go and touch a land or a farmer, because the purpose of farms is food production. That is the purpose of farms. They're not to live. You are not to put a house there. This is why farms are away from cities. Farms are all away from cities. Why? Because in the city, that's where food is processed. That's where milk is processed in the cities. And that's where people get employment to produce milk, to produce meal, maize, and all that. It comes from the farms. And then it's processed in factories in the cities for milk, or what I call orange juice and things like that. It's processed in the cities with factory. So a lot of white farmers are connected to factory. If you remove a white farmer, the country will collapse, because that white farmer is connected to processing plant in the cities. It's connected. This is why the neighboring country called Zimbabwe collapsed. Why did it collapse? Because a lot of black people, a lot of black leaders in Zimbabwe, they have no technology of farming. They had no one who knew how to farm, except that white people were the ones who were producing food for the city. They had no clue of what to do with farms. And then they chased white people out, and then they started starving. Where's the food? Who's going to feed the city? Who's going to feed the city? This is how I realized how mentally sick a lot of black people are in Africa. They don't know who's producing food for the cities. In the cities, there's no farmers in the city. You cannot take land for people who are producing food to feed the city. Who's feeding Johannesburg, Cape Town, all these, Orange Free Town, Pretoria, all these other cities around South Africa? Who's feeding them? Food comes from the farms. You cannot just go to the farm and say you want a land. Which type of land? There are three types of land. Land for houses is the land which is taken expanding the city. Is always available. There is a lot of land for houses, for housing people, removing people in squatter camps. The problems in South Africa is that we've got too much corruption, and our leaders don't know how to lead. Look at China. China is taking resources in Africa and building skyscrapers, houses, schools, hospitals. They're doing that for their people. Look at it in South Africa. Who's doing anything for the poor people? All African countries, look at all African countries, what they're doing. They're shipping resources to China. China is building houses for their people, schools for their people. African countries are not doing nothing. They're just shipping the resources, and the money they get, it goes to corrupt political people in their wallets. And they're leading the people. And when they're cornered, when the people start suffering, like in South Africa, people suffering from nothing is changing here. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poor. They don't know, and the ruling class, which is the ANC, start pointing a finger that you are suffering simply because you don't have land. When in reality, a lot of Africans are not suffering because they don't have land. They're suffering because of poor management. Our African leaders do not know what to do. They have no vision of what type of houses should we build for our poor people. Where should we build? All African people, millions of people in Africa are leaving the countryside. They're going to the cities. Why are they going to the cities? Because in the rural areas, no electricity, no water, no sewage system. That's why millions of people in Africa are leaving the rural areas, going to the city. So the priority for the African governments is to use the tax system. You tax people who are rich, and you build houses for the poor in the city centers. Across the city centers, they need to think, what type of houses should we build for poor people? Poor people don't have money to buy houses. So the government should build like the China is doing, building skyscrapers, building a certain type of accommodation and house your people in the cities where they will get jobs, where they will go to water, where there is sewage, electricity, water system, sanitation, and things of that nature. African leaders don't have a vision. They have no vision. The only thing they know is that when they're cornered, and they know that especially towards election time, they just pointed to you, white farmers. Oh, the reason why you Africans are suffering is because a land over there. What about the resources and the corruption, which is, look at how many African countries, look at the DRC. It's got a bigger land, it's similar to South Africa. How many are black people landless there? Are black people suffering from land? No, they're all suffering due to corruption. Look at Nigeria. Look at African countries which everybody has got land. Look at even Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is worse, but the country is in black people hands. Because Zimbabwe's position didn't suffer because of any sanction of what. Zimbabwe suffered because when they removed farmers, they didn't know who was employing millions of people in the factory. All the factories which were employing people were owned by farmers in the city. Farmers own the factory process. It's like a farmer with the cattle in the rural areas is the one who's going to send the milk from the farm to be processed in the city, to the meat processing plant in the city, where people are going to get jobs, in meat processing plants, milk processing plant, juice, or what they call juice, producing oranges for juice, to produce fruits in the city to feed the city. But a lot of African leaders have no idea that the farmers are connected to the city. And they're connected. Once you remove a farmer, the entire country will collapse. Because the farmer is the reason why you are drinking that sweet juice you have. Is the reason you are eating your fruits. Is the reason you are eating food at the table. Is the reason you are eating meat. Is the reason you are eating milk. Is the reason you are eating bread. A farmer. The moment you remove that farmer and think you are going to put a black person, you think who do you think a black person is going to own a farm and start feeding the city? How many black people in Africa can say they can feed anyone? Nobody. No politician, even Cyril Ramaphosa cannot run a farm. There is no black person who can run a small farm. They cannot even feed. How many black people in South Africa can feed even 500 people? How many black people in South African parliament who can say, well, I can feed 20 people? How many? For how many years? How many African leaders who can say, well, I can run a farm, I can feed 50 people? They can't. Because all the farmers, all the people, all the food which is consumed in South Africa is coming from white farmers. 99%. There's no black person. The moment you take land away from white people, you have to be careful. Particularly farmers. You must never ever touch a farm. Land should be taken is the land for houses in the city center, to provide houses for people, to house people. That's the issues in Africa. A lot of African leaders, a lot of African countries, they don't have a housing system for poor people. They don't know how to house people. Look at China. They must look at the examples of countries like China in Asia, where countries are building skyscrapers and housing the poor people. Because poor people, they don't have money. They're not going to build. The only thing they're going to build their own squatter camps and live in squatter camps, of which in a long run, no one is going to live in a squatter camp. If a person lives in a squatter camp, they're going to be criminals. They're going to be thugs like South Africa. That's why South Africa is the worst country today. It's the worst, with so many criminals, so many thugs. I mean, South Africa is more South Africa it was one of the richest countries. Now it's one of the most dangerous countries. Why? Because of our African leaders. Look at Cyril Ramaphosa, Thabo Mbeki. I have no respect of these people. They're nothing but thugs. Nothing but criminals in power. A lot of African leaders are nothing but criminals in power, who are not being led by people who are educated. That's the problem in Africa. Most of our leaders are not from the educational background. They have nothing to do with economics. If you look at the European leaders, most of them are graduates. In America, in Europe, all of them are graduates. They went to university, they're all graduates. In Africa, 99% of African leaders are warlords, gangster, bandits. You look at their history. What were you? Criminals. Pretty much the criminals in power. A bandit. You say, why is this person in leader? They say, well, long time ago he was in the military. He know nothing about leading a country. They know nothing. Look, people need in a country, people need things like this. They need houses. They need schools. They need the hospitals. Schools, hospitals, and houses. These are the basic things people need. Schools, hospital, houses. And then electricity and water sanitation for people to drink clean water. African leaders have no idea who's producing that. They have no idea. Because you come to South Africa, all the medical institutions, hospitals which you see in South Africa, they're built by the apartheid. Black leaders never built nothing. You ask an African leader, where do you think people, if they get sick, where they're going to get help? African leaders have no vision for what they need or what the country needs. They know nothing at all. All the things you see in South Africa was built by the Europeans or the apartheid system in the past. The apartheid system or white people built that. They built everything you see in South Africa, from roads, railways, electricity, water sanitation, water purification, sewage system. Everything was built by white people. If white people go, ask yourself, in the ANC, who knows about running those things? Nobody. Black people are just in power of running things they don't know. They're just in power running things. Look at the person. Look at it in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe ate everything because white people were running on. They were producing food for the city. They were the ones purifying water, clean water. They were the one running sewage system. White companies were running water system, sewage system, school system, housing system, everything. When white people left, nobody knew how to run these things. They don't know what was. African leader, like the person who was there, Robert Mugabe is West. He messed up when he removed white people. Then there's this, who's this man who's in power? Who's this man in power now? Whatever they call him, crocodile, whatever this guy is. We've taken power after Muzenda. Who's taken power after Robert Mugabe? I don't know who this man is. Who's in power in Zimbabwe currently? He's the worst person. Those guys have no economic mentality. They don't know how to run country. They were bandits, military bandits a long time ago. That's the only thing they know. How are they going to run institutions of government when these people's background is not good? In white people, they know economics. They know people need water, clean water, people need schools, people need hospital. In Africa, like South Africa, in South Africa, 99% of poor South African people should not pay school fees. No, you must provide education from the government. Government provide education. Like in America, people don't pay for education, poor people. No, the government provide free education, free hospital, free things of that nature. African people have never analyzed our people are poor. What can we do to help our people? They don't. The only thing they do is stealing the resources, completely destroying South Africa. Like South Africa. South Africa is going straight into the drain. Do not touch the land. Don't touch land. Land should stay, I believe 100% land should stay in the hands of white people. Black people should be housed in the city, not to go and touch a land when in reality there is no African person there who can feed 50 people. In parliament, zero. The moment you start touching land, that's the moment South Africa will be 1,000 times worse than Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is better, it's got 12 million. South Africa have got over 50 million people. So feeding those people when you don't have the science to produce a large quantities of food, not just a small farm. You need to produce a large quantities of food and feeding people every day. No one wants to go to the shop and say, well, there's no bread, there's no milk, because the farmer have lost a farm there. You will start killing each other like in South Africa. They will start killing each other. Like, why is there no food? So you must not touch land, particular land of white people. What we see in South Africa is because a lot of Africans are not educated, particularly in South Africa. South African black people, majority of them are not educated. They don't know that African leaders, they talk, everything they're saying is for votes. Like the Cyril Maposa now. Everything is talking about land. It's simple to gain votes next year, 2019. It's for votes. They're not doing things because they care or they know that food is. They know. They say, oh, we can't take land because we can't take it. We need to manage land so that we have food security. No. Do not touch any farm, especially white-owned farms. Don't touch white-owned farms. Many African people just take one farm, and whoever wants to produce, if it's a black person, say there is a farm we gave you there. You produce food. If you fail to produce, we take it back. Don't just say, well, let's take white people's farms and then put black people. Who do you think there is no African person who's interested even in farming? Black people are not interested. Black people, as time went on, a lot of our people are leaving farms and coming to the city. So the government should concentrate in building houses for the poor in the city and not waste time talking about how they want to take land for white people. The moment you take land for white people, that's the moment the country is going to collapse. It's not only going to collapse, millions of people, because you look at a lot of black people in Africa, especially in South Africa, they don't know who's producing food for the nation. Because the cities are not farms. Cities are where food is consumed. Farmers are the ones producing. A lot of white people are producing food for the city. You cannot go and touch them. The moment you touch them, you collapse. Who's producing food for America? Because 90% of people 95% of people in America live in the city. 95%. You see what I'm saying? So who lives in the rural areas? A few farms are the ones who own large quantities of land, but they produce more food to feed the people in the city. And look at food in America, how cheap it is. Because it is being produced by few farmers own large pieces of land to produce food for the city. This is why you cannot put people in the rural areas, in the farms. You can't put black people in the farms and say, well, you are going to produce. They don't have the science and the technology to produce food for the city, even for themselves. A lot of Africans, if there is a drought for 2 years, they run away and leave the farms and go to the city. If drought comes within 1 year, all Africans will run away and go to the city. That's what they're doing in Zambia, in Sudan, in Kenya, in Malawi, in Ghana. All African people are leaving the countryside and going to the city. Because 99% of people are going to go to the city. Because in the cities there's electricity, there's water, there's sanitation. In the rural areas, you cannot go and take a farm and say you are going to stay there. Who do you think is going to put a electricity there in the rural areas? African leaders are not going to do that. It will take hundreds and hundreds of years before they do that. They're too corrupt to manage things of that nature. You know what I'm saying? So in South Africa, black people should stay away from farm. The land which Africans or black people or South Africans need is the housing We don't have a housing policy in South Africa. We have no housing policy to say who is responsible for housing the poor. You cannot look at what's happening to Angola. Angola took oil resources and sell it to China and say, China, come and build houses for our people. And then they didn't understand, they didn't know and assess their people and see that our people are poor. We need houses for poor people, nice, good, clean houses. And then they asked the Chinese to come and build houses. The China built skyscrapers which were extremely tall and too expensive. And they just leave them there. Instead of asking people to say, let's build houses in the city where black people are, and we're going to house people there. They didn't. Instead, they asked China to come and build what China is building in China and say, build it in Africa. China just look for a land in Angola, and they just build skyscrapers in a land where black people are not living there. And no one is living there. $20 billion all lost in the drain. You can't build the skyscrapers in the rural areas when in reality people are going to fetch for houses in the cities. That's what they did in Angola, wasting $20 billion, building skyscrapers, and now there's nobody lives there. Beautiful, expensive skyscrapers in the rural areas, in the jungle. Why would you do that? Why didn't you think, wait a minute, we need to produce houses for the poor people, not to just put in expensive skyscrapers in the rural areas? And you think people are just going to come and live there with no jobs, no nothing, because someone is going to see skyscrapers and go inside? They never planned. This is why I say African leaders have no vision of what type of houses they need to build. You know what I mean? So, like I say, as far as houses are concerned, land is concerned in South Africa, black people should never. The moment you start taking land, the country is going to collapse. It's not because I don't want black people to be housed or to get land. No, it's because in South Africa, our leaders have no vision of what type of houses they build. Go to China and see. Let them go to China and say, well, China, let's see what you are building for your poor people. Well, China is taking the resources of Africa. They're building things for their poor people. African leaders are not doing nothing. They're not doing nothing. They're shipping resources, taking the money into their pockets. Shipping resources to China, taking the money and putting in their pockets and eating with their families. Like in South Africa, they're too corrupt, extremely corrupt. They cannot run things. This is why things are better off run privately. They're better off run. I don't trust no South African black person. Zero. Not at all. I don't trust Cyril Ramaphosa, because Cyril Ramaphosa is going to be out of government. You need to look at African leaders, African people, and say, who can lead an economy here? Do you trust them in the banking system? Look at how many robberies are going on there. And most of people in South Africa, a lot of police officers are even connected to the robbers. And you can think, if white people were not there in this country, everything would collapse. South Africa would be worse corrupt than Nigeria. If white people leave, South Africa would be worse than Nigeria. It will be the most corrupt country on earth. And it will be the worst country once white people leave. That's why I pray to God, white people should not leave. We need to import more white people in South Africa. Not white people. We need more white people to come into South Africa. We need to import more white people. That's the only people who can deal with corruption. That's the only people who can because the African people, they're too corrupt and they're too thugs, they're criminals. Every African leader, if you study them, they're all stealing the country's resources. And that people are starving. That people are dying. Just look at all these African. This is why things are better off privately run. A private farmer is going to produce food and still feed millions of Africans. A private farmer in South Africa can produce enough food to feed millions of South Africans. An African leader will never do that. An African leader, he can be in power. His people can be starving at the same time. Go to Angola. Go to many African countries which are rich in oil, and look at black people. Go to any African country which is rich in oil, a lot of rich, and look at the status of our people. There is no roads, no houses. People live in squalor. People have got no water, no electricity. Go in all African countries which have got a lot of resources and see how the black people live. It's the West. The richest African countries with oil and resources, majority of our people live the West type of lifestyle. The West, including South Africa. All African countries which are rich in oil and resources, our people are 10 times worse. And look at our leaders. They're the ones skimming the money. That's why I don't believe in black leaders running any economic affairs. It's better off in private hands. 100%. Like South Africa, it's better off in private hands. Leave it the same way it is. Black people should concentrate on dealing with corruption. dealing with corruption alone. Because the moment you start going and say, let me touch private jobs, private businesses, that's where things are going to be affected, like Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe was okay for black people to deal with their own politics alone. The moment you start saying Zimbabwe was affected, the moment they start saying, let's go start farmers. The moment you go and touch a farmer, someone who's producing food for the city, that's where you realize when they go, in Zimbabwe they didn't know. When they stopped white farmers, the moment they stopped white farmers, they were surprised there was no food in the city. They had no connection. That's when I realized how mentally sick a lot of people. They didn't think who's producing food for the city. They didn't know. They were just going to the shops and buying and coming back. You go buy bread and milk and coming back. And then you have no idea where is this bread and milk coming from. The farmer who's few miles away from the city is the one shipping the food to you. But they didn't know. And then they stopped the white farmers. They said, oh, you leave the farmers and go. And they remained in the city, and they were surprised nothing was coming. Then people started starving. This is why a lot of people who were given land in Zimbabwe, they left it and went to South Africa. They left the land and went to South Africa. Because when they left, they realized white farmers have left. Some of them going to Zimbabwe. They followed them. It's better for me to follow these white people and go work for them. Because they realized there was nothing left in Zimbabwe. Because in the cities, no food, no water, nothing was coming. The people who were making those things happen, they were gone. This is why I say African leaders, they don't think in advance. They don't think, before you start chasing people around, you need to think, who's producing water, which you are drinking? Who's producing food, which you are drinking? Who's producing electricity, which we need? Who's producing that before you do your decision? A lot of African leaders, they don't think about that. They start chasing white people. Oh, go there, go away. Oh, go leave that farm, go that. You are going to see the moment you do that, you are going to see to yourself what's happened to you. You chase a farmer, no milk at home, no bread, nothing, no food. The moment that farmer goes, you've got nothing. Because a lot of African leaders, they don't think who's producing food for their people. Because in Africa, like in South Africa, there is no black person producing food. All the food consumed in South Africa, 99% comes from white people. You see, this is why I say African leaders, they don't think who's feeding millions of black people. They don't think. They just take decision, and then they'll cry later. Few minutes, you start crying to the United Nations and crying for white people to come and throw bags of rice like what they do in Ethiopia and North Africa. Because most of those people are not thinking who's producing food. African leaders, they don't think who's producing food for the city, who's feeding our children in the city. They don't think who's doing that. Because all of those people who are producing food are mostly private people. A leader doesn't think of things like that. That's why you should stay away from affecting private farmers, like white people in South Africa. You shouldn't. I don't agree with it taking farmers at all, 100%. That's exactly what I'm saying.